The sky above Earth changed color as thousands of alien ships appeared out of nowhere. The massive fleet hovered silently, casting long shadows over the planet below. People everywhere stopped what they were doing to look up. Some took pictures with their phones, while others held their loved ones close, unsure of what was about to happen. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. In a small apartment in Chicago, Alex Carter stared out the window, his heart pounding. He had spent years studying strange signals from space, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Alex was an astrophysicist, someone who studied stars and planets, and he worked at NASA. For months, he had noticed unusual patterns in the data coming from deep space. He tried to warn people, but no one listened. Now those warnings seemed frighteningly real. Across the country, Laura Monroe sat strapped into her fighter jet on an orbital defense platform high above Earth. She was a pilot, one of the best, and she had trained her whole life for moments like this. But nothing in her training had prepared her for something this big. The alien ships stretched as far as her eyes could see, each one larger than any human-made vessel. Her hands gripped the controls tightly as she waited for orders. Then it happened. A voice came through every communication channel on Earth. It wasn't human. The sound was cold and mechanical, like many voices speaking at once. "This is the collective," it said. "Surrender your planet or face destruction." The message repeated over and over, leaving no room for negotiation. Panic spread across the globe. Governments scrambled to respond, but there was no time to prepare. Within minutes, the aliens acted. Their ships fired beams of energy that cut through Earth's defenses like paper. Military bases exploded into flames, and cities crumbled under the assault. The orbital platforms where Laura was stationed shook violently as explosions rocked nearby ships. Alarms blared, and pilots shouted orders over the chaos. Laura's commander gave the signal to attack. "All fighters, launch," he yelled. Laura pushed the throttle forward, her jet roaring to life as she shot toward the enemy fleet. Around her, other pilots did the same. They flew in tight formations, dodging blasts of light and debris from destroyed ships. Despite their bravery, the humans were outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, their fighters were hit and sent spiraling into the void. Laura gritted her teeth and focused on her target, a massive alien ship looming ahead. Back on Earth, Alex watched the news with growing horror. Reports poured in from all over the world. Cities were burning, and millions of lives were already lost. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and colleagues asking if he knew anything more. He didn't. All he could do was sit and watch as humanity fought for survival against an enemy it barely understood. As night fell, the skies remained lit by fire and destruction. The alien ships showed no signs of slowing down. In Chicago, Alex turned off the TV and picked up his laptop. If anyone could figure out how to fight back, it was him. He began analyzing the data again, searching for a weakness in the invaders' technology. Somewhere, somehow, there had to be a way to stop them. Meanwhile, in space, Laura narrowly avoided another blast from an alien weapon. Her squadron was down to just 3 fighters now, including hers. She glanced at her radar and saw more enemy ships closing in. She knew they couldn't keep this up forever. But giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. Humanity was counting on them. The attack continued without pause. The alien ships moved with precision, as if controlled by a single mind. Their weapons tore through Earth's defenses, leaving destruction in their wake. Laura Monroe fought desperately alongside the few remaining pilots from her squadron. Her hands trembled on the controls, but she forced herself to stay focused. Every second counted. She could hear the voices of her fellow pilots over the comms, some shouting orders, others crying out in fear. One by one, those voices began to fade. On Earth, Alex Carter worked feverishly at his laptop. He sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, surrounded by piles of papers and empty coffee cups. The room was silent except for the soft hum of his computer fan. Outside, the city was dark, Power grids had failed across much of Chicago. But Alex didn't notice. His eyes were glued to the screen as he sifted through data intercepted during the initial attack. He replayed fragments of the alien transmission, listening carefully for patterns or clues. Something about it felt familiar, like a puzzle he'd seen before but couldn't quite solve. Meanwhile, in New York City, David Hayes ran through the crowded streets with his wife, Sarah, and their young son, Ethan. David was a journalist, and he had been covering the invasion when the first wave hit. Now, all he cared about was keeping his family safe. The air smelled of smoke, and the ground shook with each explosion. People screamed and pushed past them, trying to escape the chaos. David held Ethan's hand tightly while Sarah carried a small backpack filled with supplies. They had no destination in mind, just a desperate need to get away from the fighting. Back in space, Laura's fighter took a direct hit. The impact sent her spinning out of control, alarms blaring inside the cockpit. For a moment, everything went black. Then, with great effort, she regained control and steadied the ship. Her heart raced as she checked the damage report. The shields were down to 15%, and the engines were barely functioning. She knew she wouldn't last much longer. Still, she refused to retreat. "Not yet," she muttered under her breath. "We can still do this." Her thoughts turned to Alex. Before the invasion, they had argued about his work. She thought he spent too much time staring at screens instead of living in the real world. Now, she hoped more than ever that he could find something, anything, that might help them fight back. She glanced at her radar again. Only 2 other human ships remained nearby, both badly damaged. Together, they formed a loose triangle around a massive alien vessel. If they could take it down, maybe they could buy Earth some time. Down on the surface, Alex finally spotted something unusual in the data. A repeating sequence buried deep within the alien transmission. It wasn't random noise. It was a code. His pulse quickened as he realized what it meant. The collective relied on interconnected systems to coordinate their fleet. If even part of that network could be disrupted, it might throw their entire operation into chaos. But how? And where would they even begin? As Alex worked, David and his family reached an abandoned subway station. They huddled together in the shadows, listening to distant explosions. Ethan clung to his father, tears streaming down his face. "Are we going to die?" he whispered. David hugged him close. "No, buddy," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "We're going to be okay." In orbit, Laura made a decision. She opened a secure channel to Captain Rachel Bennett, who was leading the remnants of Earth's fleet. "I have an idea," Laura said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. She explained her plan, a risky maneuver to disable one of the alien ships from the inside. Rachel hesitated, then gave her approval. "Good luck," she said simply. Laura exhaled slowly and prepared for what came next. She had no idea if her plan would work, but failure wasn't an option. Humanity's survival depended on it. Laura Monroe's plan was simple but dangerous. She would lead a small team of pilots into the heart of an alien ship, using stealth and speed to avoid detection. The goal was to disable its core systems, which Alex Carter had identified as a possible weak point in the collective's network. If they succeeded, it might disrupt the invaders' coordination and give Earth's forces a fighting chance. But getting there alive would be the hardest part. Back on Earth, Alex worked tirelessly to refine his discovery. He shared his findings with NASA and military commanders, explaining how the aliens relied on interconnected systems to function. "If we can break that connection," he told them over a shaky video call, "we might be able to confuse them long enough to strike back." His words sparked hope among the survivors, though many doubted such a risky mission could succeed. Still, they agreed to support Laura's team in any way they could. In space, Laura gathered her crew. There were only 4 pilots left who were willing and able to join her: John Miller, Emily Scott, Chris Dawson, and Maria Lopes. All of them had seen friends die during the invasion, and all of them were determined to make the collective pay. They met aboard the battered cruiser Liberty Dawn, where Captain Rachel Bennett gave them a final briefing. "This is our best shot," she said firmly. "Don't let us down." The team launched their fighters under cover of darkness, slipping past the alien blockade like shadows. Their ships were equipped with experimental cloaking technology designed to hide them from enemy sensors. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to get them close. As they approached the massive alien vessel, a towering monolith bristling with weapons, Laura's voice came through the comms. "Stay sharp," she warned. "We're not out of this yet." Inside the alien ship, the air was cold and metallic. The walls glowed faintly with strange symbols, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. Laura's team moved cautiously, sticking to the edges of wide corridors patrolled by biomechanical drones. These creatures looked part machine, part insect, their movements quick and unpredictable. One wrong step, and they'd be discovered. John took point, scanning ahead with a handheld device Alex had modified to detect energy signatures. "This way," he whispered, pointing toward a large door at the end of the corridor. The others followed silently, their footsteps muffled by the thick metal floor. When they reached the door, Emily used a cutting tool to slice through the lock. Sparks flew as the heavy panel slid open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Inside, they found rows of dormant alien soldiers standing upright in alcoves along the walls. Each one was taller than a human, with sleek armor and glowing eyes that flickered faintly. Laura froze for a moment, staring at the eerie sight. "These must be reinforcements," she murmured. "If they wake up, we're dead." Maria set to work planting explosives at key points in the room, while Chris kept watch. Laura and John stayed near the entrance, ready to defend the group if needed. Time felt like it was slipping away, each second stretching longer than the last. Finally, Maria gave the signal. "All set," she said quietly. "Let's move." As they retraced their steps, a low hum filled the air. The glow from the walls grew brighter, and the symbols began to pulse faster. Something was wrong. "They know we're here," Emily shouted. Behind them, the sound of approaching drones echoed through the corridor. Laura clenched her fists. "Run," she ordered. The team sprinted back the way they came, explosions erupting behind them as the charges detonated. The shockwave shook the entire ship, sending debris flying. Laura glanced back once, just in time to see the chamber collapse into chaos. For now, their mission was complete, but escaping alive would be another challenge entirely. The explosion rocked the alien ship, sending waves of energy rippling through its core. Alarms blared everywhere, a deafening sound that echoed down the corridors. Laura Monroe and her team sprinted as fast as they could, their footsteps pounding against the vibrating metal floor. Behind them, chunks of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the path they had just taken. The air grew thick with smoke and sparks, making it hard to see or breathe. "We're not going to make it," Maria Lopes shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Her face was streaked with sweat, and she stumbled slightly as another tremor shook the ship. Laura grabbed her arm to steady her. "Keep moving." Laura snapped, her tone sharp but firm. She knew stopping meant death. They had come too far to give up now. Ahead of them, John Miller spotted an intersection in the corridor. He pointed toward a narrow passage on the left. "This way," he called out, his voice barely audible over the chaos. The team followed him without hesitation, ducking under falling debris and dodging bursts of energy from damaged panels along the walls. Every step felt heavier than the last, their bodies pushed to the limit after hours of tension and fear. As they ran, Chris Dawson glanced over his shoulder and saw movement in the haze behind them. Biomechanical drones were closing in, their glowing eyes cutting through the smoke like searchlights. "They're coming," Chris yelled, his voice tight with urgency. Laura didn't need to look back to know what he meant. She could hear the mechanical whirring of their legs and the faint hum of their weapons charging. John skidded to a stop at another sealed door and quickly pulled out a device Alex Carter had given them. It was designed to hack into alien systems, though no one knew how reliable it would be. His hands trembled as he connected the device to the control panel beside the door. Numbers and symbols flashed across the screen, scrolling faster than anyone could read. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, tapping furiously at the keypad. Laura turned to face the approaching drones, raising her weapon. Emily, Scott, and Maria joined her, forming a defensive line. They fired blindly into the smoke, hoping to slow the creatures down. Each shot echoed loudly in the confined space, and for a few moments, the drones hesitated, retreating slightly as their armored shells absorbed the impacts. But it wasn't enough to stop them for long. Finally, the door slid open with a loud hiss. "Go! Go!" John yelled, waving the others forward. One by one, they dashed inside, finding themselves in a smaller, dimly lit room filled with strange machinery. Laura slammed her hand on the control panel, sealing the door behind them just as the drones reached it. The sound of their claws scraping against the other side sent shivers down everyone's spines. For a brief moment, the team caught their breath. Laura leaned against the wall, her chest heaving as she tried to calm her racing heart. "We're not safe yet," she reminded them, though no one needed reminding. Outside, the alien ship continued to groan and shake, its systems clearly destabilized by the sabotage. Lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the room. Emily moved to examine the machinery, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This looks important," she said, pointing to a cluster of glowing conduits at the center of the room. "If we can disable this, it might take out the whole ship." Laura nodded. "Do it," she ordered. Emily pulled out a small EMP grenade, one of several Alex had provided, and placed it carefully among the conduits. She set the timer and stepped back. "We got 30 seconds," Emily announced. The team exchanged grim looks. There was only one exit, and it led straight back into the chaos they had just escaped. Laura took a deep breath and tightened her grip on her weapon. "Stay together," she said, "and don't stop running." The countdown began, each second ticking away like a hammer striking steel. When the EMP detonated, the lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The team burst through the door, heading toward the hangar where their fighters waited. Behind them, the alien ship started to break apart, consumed by internal explosions. For the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered alive in their hearts, but survival was still far from certain. The alien ship was falling apart around them. Fires raged in the corridors, and the air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Laura Monroe led her team through the chaos, her mind racing as she tried to remember the way back to the hangar. Every step felt like a gamble. The walls groaned under the strain of the collapsing structure, and pieces of the ceiling tumbled down, narrowly missing them. Behind them, the sound of pursuing drones grew louder. Their glowing eyes pierced through the haze, relentless and unyielding. Chris Dawson glanced over his shoulder and cursed under his breath. "They're getting closer," he shouted, his voice hoarse from shouting and running. Laura didn't respond. She couldn't afford to slow down or lose focus. Not now. Not when they were so close to escaping. John Miller took the lead, guiding the group through twists and turns in the labyrinthine corridors. He held up a handheld scanner Alex Carter had given them, its faint beeping helping him navigate toward the hangar. "This way," he called out, pointing ahead. The others followed without question, their trust in John's instincts keeping them moving forward despite the odds. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a massive blast door. It was sealed shut, its surface marked with strange alien symbols that pulsed faintly. Emily Scott stepped forward, already pulling out another hacking device. Her hands trembled as she connected it to the control panel beside the door. "Come on," she muttered, her eyes glued to the screen as lines of code scrolled past. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each second feeling heavier than the last. Laura kept watch, her weapon raised and ready. Through the smoke, she could see the shapes of the biomechanical drones closing in. They moved with unnatural speed, their claws clicking against the floor. "Hurry, Emily," Laura urged, her voice tight with urgency. Maria Lopes and Chris stood beside her, firing short bursts into the advancing swarm to keep them at bay. The drones staggered but kept coming, their bodies absorbing the shots like nothing. Finally, the door slid open with a loud hiss. "Go," Emily yelled, shoving the device back into her pocket. The team sprinted through the opening, finding themselves in a vast hangar filled with alien fighters and transport ships. Their own vessels were docked on the far side, tiny and fragile-looking compared to the towering machines surrounding them. But those ships represented their only chance of survival. Laura pointed toward their fighters. "Move," she ordered. The team ran as fast as their exhausted legs would carry them, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy from damaged equipment. Behind them, the drones poured into the hangar, spreading out to cut off their escape. "We're not going to make it," Maria cried, her voice breaking with fear. John stopped abruptly and turned to face the others. "Keep going," he said firmly. "I'll hold them off." His expression was calm, though his hand shook slightly as he gripped his weapon. Laura hesitated, about to argue, but John shook his head. "There's no time to waste," he said. "Get out of here." Before anyone could respond, John turned and fired a barrage of shots at the advancing drones, drawing their attention away from the rest of the team. The noise of his weapon echoed through the hangar, mixing with the screech of metal and the roar of flames. Tears welled in Laura's eyes, but she forced herself to keep moving. "Let's go," she shouted, pushing the others toward their ships. Reaching their fighters, they climbed inside and powered up the engines. Laura glanced back one last time, searching for John, but all she saw was smoke and fire. Her chest tightened with grief, but she knew there was nothing she could do. "Launch," she commanded, her voice cracking with emotion. The fighters shot out of the hangar just as the alien ship began to implode. Explosions tore through its hull, sending shockwaves rippling across space. Laura's team regrouped outside, watching as the massive vessel broke apart and drifted into the void. For a moment, silence fell among them, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. They had done it. They had crippled one of the collective's ships, but the cost weighed heavily on all of them. John's sacrifice would not be forgotten. As they set course for Earth, Laura clenched her fists on the controls. This victory was small, but it proved something important. Humanity still had a fighting chance, and they weren't going to give up. Not yet. The return journey to Earth was quiet but heavy with emotion. Laura Monroe sat alone in her fighter, staring at the control panel as tears streamed silently down her face. She replayed John Miller's final moments in her mind over and over again, the way he had stood his ground, sacrificing himself so the rest of them could escape. His bravery had saved their lives, but it came at a cost that felt unbearable. Emily Scott and Maria Lopes didn't speak much either. They flew side by side, their eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. None of them wanted to talk about what had happened. Words wouldn't change anything. Chris Dawson tried to break the silence once, asking if everyone was okay, but his voice trailed off when no one responded. The weight of their loss hung in the air like a storm cloud, impossible to ignore. Back on Earth, Alex Carter waited anxiously for news of the mission. He paced back and forth in his apartment, glancing at the clock every few minutes. The room was dark except for the glow of his laptop screen, which displayed maps of the alien fleet and fragments of intercepted data. His hand shook slightly as he sipped cold coffee, his mind racing with possibilities. Had Laura and her team succeeded? Were they even still alive? Finally, the comms crackled to life. "Alex," came Laura's voice, strained but steady. Alex froze, gripping the edge of the table. "We did it," she said. "The ship is gone." Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Her tone told him there was more to the story. "But we lost John," she added quietly. Alex closed his eyes, letting out a slow breath. He hadn't known John well, but he knew how much the man meant to Laura and the others. By the time the fighters landed at the orbital defense platform, Captain Rachel Bennett was waiting for them. Her expression softened when she saw the empty seat in Laura's cockpit. Without saying a word, she nodded in understanding. Laura climbed out of her ship and walked straight to Rachel, her face pale and drawn. "It worked," she said simply. "But I don't know what to do next." Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did what you had to do," she replied. "And you gave us hope. That's more than anyone else has managed since this started." Laura nodded, though she didn't feel hopeful. Hope seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford right now. Meanwhile, Alex shared the news with the remnants of Earth's leadership. The sabotage of the alien command ship had caused widespread disruption among the collective's fleet, leaving gaps in their network and slowing their attacks. It wasn't enough to end the invasion, but it bought humanity precious time to regroup and plan their next move. Military commanders began discussing strategies to exploit the aliens' weakened state, while scientists worked around the clock to study the technology recovered from the destroyed vessel. In New York City, David Hayes and his family finally found refuge in an underground shelter. The space was cramped and dimly lit, filled with other survivors huddled together for warmth and safety. Ethan clung to his father, too scared to sleep. Sarah handed him a blanket and whispered comforting words, though her own fear lingered just beneath the surface. David stared at the cracked screen of his phone, scrolling through updates about the battle in space. When he read about the successful sabotage, he allowed himself a small smile. For the first time in days, he let himself believe they might actually survive this. As the hours passed, reports poured in from across the globe. The alien forces were retreating temporarily, regrouping after the damage inflicted by Laura's team. Cities that had been under siege suddenly went quiet, giving survivors a brief moment to catch their breath. But no one trusted the calm. It felt like the eye of a hurricane, a deceptive pause before the storm returned stronger than ever. Laura joined Alex later that night, sitting beside him as he pored over new data. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Alex broke the silence. "What happens next?" he asked softly. Laura looked at him, her eyes reflecting both determination and exhaustion. "We keep fighting," she said, "because we have to." The days that followed were a blur of activity. Earth's remaining forces worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of the war. Captain Rachel Bennett coordinated efforts from the orbital defense platform, her voice steady and commanding as she directed pilots, engineers, and strategists. Laura Monroe spent most of her time debriefing commanders and analyzing the data Alex Carter had gathered. The sabotage mission had weakened the collective's network, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens regrouped and launched another attack. Alex barely slept. He spent hours poring over information recovered from the alien ship, searching for any clue that might give humanity an edge. His apartment became a makeshift command center, cluttered with papers, laptops, and half-empty coffee cups. One night, he discovered something crucial. The aliens' interconnected systems relied on a central hub located aboard their largest vessel, a colossal mothership hidden deep within their fleet. If they could destroy or disable that hub, it might sever the collective's ability to coordinate their attacks entirely. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Alex explained during a meeting with military leaders. He pointed to a holographic map showing the alien fleet's formation. "This mothership is the key. Take it out, and the rest of their ships will be thrown into chaos." The room fell silent as people absorbed the weight of his words. It was a bold plan, perhaps too bold, but it was also their best chance at turning the tide. Laura volunteered to lead the assault. "I've already been inside one of their ships," she said firmly. "I know what to expect." Her tone left no room for argument, though Rachel hesitated. She didn't want to send Laura back into danger so soon after losing John, but she knew how much was at stake. "You'll have backup this time," Rachel promised. "We'll throw everything we've got left into this mission." Preparations began immediately. Engineers worked around the clock to outfit human fighters with upgraded weapons and shielding based on alien technology. Pilots trained relentlessly, practicing formations and tactics designed to overwhelm the enemy. Meanwhile, Alex continued refining his analysis, sending updates to the fleet in real time. David Hayes followed the developments closely, documenting the efforts in his journal. Though he wasn't directly involved in the fight, he felt a deep sense of responsibility to tell the world about the courage and sacrifice of those risking their lives. On the day of the mission, Laura stood on the deck of the orbital platform, looking out at the battered remains of Earth's fleet. Only a handful of ships were still operational, each one patched together with scrap metal and sheer determination. Behind her, Emily Scott and Maria Lopes checked their fighters one last time, their faces grim but resolute. Chris Dawson approached Laura, holding out a small photo of John Miller. "For luck," he said quietly. Laura took it and pinned it inside her cockpit, nodding in gratitude. As the fighters launched into space, the mood among the crew was tense but focused. They flew in tight formation toward the heart of the alien fleet, dodging patrols and avoiding detection. When they reached the mothership, its size was overwhelming. A monolithic structure bristling with weapons and glowing with ominous energy. Laura's voice came through the comms, calm but firm. "Stay sharp. This isn't over yet." The team deployed EMP grenades and targeted critical points along the hull, causing explosions that rippled through the massive ship. Inside, chaos erupted as systems failed and alarms blared. But the aliens fought back fiercely, deploying swarms of drones and launching counterattacks. One by one, human fighters fell, their sacrifices paving the way for the final strike. When the central hub exploded, the entire alien fleet shuddered. Ships drifted aimlessly, their coordination shattered. Laura watched from her cockpit, her hands trembling as she realized what they had accomplished. For the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered alive, not just for survival, but for victory. The explosion of the alien mothership was like nothing anyone had ever seen. A massive shockwave rippled through space, sending debris and fragments of metal spinning in every direction. The glow from the blast lit up the darkness, casting an eerie light over the battered human fleet. Laura Monroe shielded her eyes as she watched the colossal vessel break apart, its once imposing form reduced to a cloud of fire and smoke. For a moment, there was silence. No alarms, no weapons firing, just the faint hum of engines and the sound of static on the comms. Then reality set in. The collective's fleet began to drift aimlessly, their ships no longer moving with precision or purpose. Without the central hub to coordinate them, the aliens were in disarray. On board the orbital defense platform, Captain Rachel Bennett allowed herself a small smile for the first time in weeks. "We did it," she said softly, though her voice carried a note of disbelief. Humanity had struck a blow that even the collective couldn't ignore. Back on Earth, people gathered around radios and makeshift screens to watch the aftermath unfold. In New York City, David Hayes held his son Ethan close as they listened to reports of the victory. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she realized what this meant. Not safety, not yet, but a chance to fight back. Across the globe, survivors emerged from shelters and ruins, cheering despite the destruction surrounding them. It wasn't over, but for the first time, hope felt tangible. Laura and her team regrouped near the edge of the alien fleet, their fighters damaged but still operational. Only 3 ships remained, including hers. Emily Scott and Maria Lopes checked in one by one, their voices shaky but alive with relief. "We made it," Emily said, her tone almost questioning, as if she couldn't believe they were still alive. Laura nodded to herself, though no one could see her. "We did," she replied, "but we're not done yet." Alex Carter monitored the situation from Earth, his laptop displaying live updates from the battle. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up to him. His hands trembled as he covered his face, the weight of everything hitting him all at once. They had crippled the collective, but the cost had been enormous. Too many lives lost, too much pain endured. Still, he knew humanity couldn't afford to stop now. The collective might be weakened, but they weren't gone. In orbit, Rachel gave the order to retreat. "Get back here," she told Laura and the others. "You've done enough." Reluctantly, Laura obeyed, guiding her fighter toward the orbital platform. As she flew, she glanced at the photo of John Miller pinned inside her cockpit. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to focus. John's sacrifice, and those of countless others, had given humanity this chance. She wouldn't waste it. When the surviving fighters docked, medical teams rushed to tend to the pilots. Laura climbed out of her ship, her legs unsteady beneath her. Rachel met her at the hatch, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You saved us," Rachel said simply. Laura shook her head. "We all did," she corrected. "And we'll have to keep doing it if we want to win." Over the next few days, Earth's leaders worked to stabilize the situation. Survivors began rebuilding cities, clearing rubble, and setting up temporary shelters. Factories that had been abandoned during the invasion reopened, producing weapons and supplies needed for the ongoing fight. Scientists studied the wreckage of alien ships, learning how to adapt their technology for human use. Every victory, no matter how small, fueled determination. But the scars of war ran deep. Families mourned loved ones, and survivors struggled to cope with the trauma of what they'd endured. David wrote about it all in his journal, documenting both the horrors and the moments of courage. "This isn't just a story of survival," he wrote. "It's a story of hope, of people coming together when everything seemed lost." For Laura, Alex, and everyone else involved, the battle wasn't truly over. The collective would return. It was only a matter of time. But humanity had proven something important. They weren't going to give up without a fight. And that resolve might just be enough to turn the tide once and for all. The weeks that followed the destruction of the alien mothership were a mix of rebuilding and preparation. The collective's fleet had retreated into deep space, leaving Earth battered but alive. Cities lay in ruins, their streets filled with rubble and ash. Survivors worked tirelessly to clear debris, repair damaged buildings, and set up temporary shelters for those who had lost everything. The air was heavy with grief, but also with determination. Humanity had survived its darkest hour, and now it was time to move forward. Laura Monroe returned to Earth after spending days helping coordinate efforts aboard the orbital platform. She walked through the streets of Chicago, her boots crunching on broken glass and twisted metal. The city was unrecognizable, its skyline marred by collapsed buildings and charred remains. But amid the devastation, she saw signs of hope. Volunteers handed out food and water to families huddled together in makeshift camps. Engineers worked around the clock to restore power and communication networks. Everywhere she looked, people were doing what they could to rebuild. Alex Carter spent most of his time in a lab set up in an abandoned warehouse. Scientists from around the world had gathered there to study alien technology recovered during the battles. Alex pored over fragments of alien ships, analyzing their energy systems and weapons. His goal was simple: turn their own technology against them. "If we can understand how they think," he told Laura one evening, "we can stay one step ahead next time." She nodded, though the thought of another battle made her stomach churn. Across the country, David Hayes continued documenting the aftermath of the invasion. He interviewed survivors, capturing their stories of loss and resilience. One day, he spoke with a young girl named Lily, who had lost her parents in the initial attack. Her voice trembled as she described hiding in a basement while explosions rocked the ground above. But when David asked her what kept her going, she smiled faintly. "I have to be brave," she said, "for my mom and dad." Moments like these reminded him why telling these stories mattered. It wasn't just about recording history. It was about honoring the strength of those who endured. Military leaders used the brief reprieve to regroup and plan for the future. Captain Rachel Bennett oversaw the training of new pilots, many of whom were volunteers with no prior experience. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for experts," she told Laura during a meeting. "Everyone has to pitch in." Laura agreed, though she worried about sending inexperienced fighters into battle. Still, she threw herself into teaching them everything she knew, sharing tactics and lessons learned from her own missions. As humanity prepared for the inevitable return of the collective, small victories began to add up. Factories produced advanced weapons based on alien designs. Engineers repaired and upgraded Earth's remaining ships, making them faster and more durable. In New York City, David watched as crews raised a new communications tower, a symbol of resilience and progress. "This is how we fight back," he wrote in his journal, "not just with guns, but with hope." One night, Laura stood on a hill overlooking the city, staring at the stars. She thought about John Miller and all the others who hadn't made it this far. Their sacrifices weighed heavily on her heart, but they also fueled her resolve. Beside her, Alex joined silently, holding a tablet displaying updated data on the collective's movements. "They're still out there," he said quietly. Laura nodded. "And so are we," she replied. "We'll be ready." Though the scars of war ran deep, humanity refused to give up. They had faced unimaginable odds and survived, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they refused to surrender. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were determined to see it through. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel hopeless. It felt possible. Months passed, and Earth slowly began to heal. The scars of the invasion were still visible: crumbled buildings, empty streets, and fields of rubble. But life found a way to push forward. People planted crops in abandoned lots, rebuilt homes from scraps of metal and wood, and shared what little they had with neighbors. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Humanity had learned the hard way that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about unity. Laura Monroe spent much of her time traveling between cities, meeting with survivors and offering encouragement. She visited schools where children drew pictures of stars and spaceships, their imaginations undimmed by the horrors they'd witnessed. In Chicago, she helped organize community workshops, teaching people basic self-defense and emergency preparedness. "We can't let fear control us," she told a group of volunteers one afternoon. "If we do, they've already won." Alex Carter continued his work in the lab, now joined by teams of scientists from around the world. Together, they developed new technologies inspired by the alien designs. Weapons became more precise, ships faster and more agile, and communication systems nearly impossible to hack. But Alex didn't stop there. He also focused on creating tools to help rebuild, machines that purified water, generated clean energy, and repaired damaged infrastructure. "Surviving isn't enough," he said during a presentation to Earth's leaders. "We need to thrive." In New York City, David Hayes published his first article since the invasion. It was a collection of stories from survivors, each one highlighting courage in the face of despair. The piece went viral, spreading hope to millions who read it. People wrote letters thanking him for reminding them of their resilience. For David, it was proof that even in darkness, light could be found. The military remained vigilant, knowing the collective would return. Under Rachel Bennett's leadership, Earth's forces trained harder than ever before. Pilots practiced complex maneuvers, engineers tested experimental upgrades, and strategists planned for every possible scenario. Laura often joined these sessions, sharing her experiences and insights. Her presence inspired others, especially the younger recruits who saw her as a symbol of hope. One evening, Laura stood on the orbital platform with Rachel, staring out at the stars. A distant blinking light caught their attention. A drone sent to monitor deep space had spotted movement. "They're coming back," Rachel said quietly. Laura nodded, her jaw tightening. "Then we'll be ready," she replied. When news of the collective's approach reached Earth, panic threatened to spread again. But this time, humanity faced it differently. Communities came together, preparing shelters and evacuation plans. Factories worked overtime to produce supplies, and volunteers signed up to assist however they could. Even children pitched in, collecting food and blankets for those in need. Fear was still present, but it no longer ruled them. As the alien fleet drew closer, Earth's forces launched into space, determined to meet the enemy head-on. Laura led the charge, her fighter sleek and powerful thanks to Alex's innovations. Behind her flew hundreds of ships, each one carrying the hopes of billions. When the battle began, humanity fought with everything they had. Their weapons struck true, their tactics outsmarted the invaders, and their unity overwhelmed the collective's forces. By the time the final alien ship retreated, Earth stood victorious. Cheers erupted across the planet as people celebrated not just survival, but triumph. Laura returned home to find Alex waiting for her. They embraced without speaking, their shared relief saying more than words ever could. In the months that followed, humanity looked to the stars with renewed purpose. Space exploration programs expanded, driven by a desire to understand and protect the universe beyond Earth. Schools taught lessons about resilience, innovation, and cooperation, ensuring future generations would remember the sacrifices made. Though the scars of war remained, humanity emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. They had faced extinction and refused to give up. Now, as they gazed at the endless expanse above, they knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges awaited among the stars, they would face them together.